Hello everybody, in this episode of Unravelling Autism, I'll be looking at autism and behavior. The word behavior is often used when discussing or commenting on the actions of autistic children. Mostly there is a negative connotation attached to the word. We hear or talk about a child behaving badly or about a child who is said to be out of control. We also hear about tantrums and meltdowns when referring to the behavior of a child when a parent is unable to manage or control the child. This viewpoint creates the impression that behavior is all about bad behavior, which is incorrect. Behavior is not just about the actions of a child with special needs, nor is all behavior about a problem. All people behave in different ways, whether positive or negative, and they do so in response to different situations and in order to meet their needs, goals, and desires. Behavior is in fact everything that a child or person does. It encompasses all actions and responses, whether they be positive or negative. Some behavior is purposeful, and it will allow a child to meet his needs and to react appropriately to things happening in his environment. An example would be to watch a movie while eating popcorn at a movie night. Watching the movie and eating popcorn are both appropriate actions for a movie night. On the other hand, you have some behavior that will not be appropriate in a particular situation or environment. A child may be doing what he knows or has learned how to do in order to express his needs, wants, and feelings, but his behavior may not always succeed in satisfying those needs, and it could also be considered inappropriate or incorrect behavior for that situation. An example of this would be a child who screams when he wants a cookie instead of asking for it, because he does not have the language to be able to make a request. There are many behaviors that could give rise to concern, and they occur in both neurotypical and neurodivergent children. An example of such behavior in a neurotypical child might be a child who regularly falls down in the middle of the store because his father has refused to buy him the toy car that he wants. As the child grows and develops, he learns to regulate his actions and responses so that they meet the general standards of society. For example, he stops crying, asks for what he wants, and he accepts the answer whether it be positive or negative. In neurodivergent children, some behaviors that would need to be addressed are, for example, when a child's behavior is causing physical harm to himself or others, or if the child is destroying or damaging things that are around him. If a child uses behavior as a means of communicating, for example, screaming at another child who approaches his toy instead of saying "don't touch," words that he may not know or may not have been taught how to do. If a child is not complying with expected rules and routines of an occasion or environment, for example, a child who regularly walks around in a classroom while other children are seated at their desks and listening to the teacher. Let's look at some more behaviors that could present as a problem for a child and his family. Taking off all clothes during the day while not in the bathroom, biting or hitting, eating so fast that there is a danger of choking, spitting, throwing food, crying or yelling, running into the street or running away, asking the same question over and over. So why do these behaviors occur? There are endless number of possible reasons as to why a behavior could occur. As neurotypicals, the reasons for our behaviors may be many and varied, and in children with autism there are also numerous possible reasons for a behavior, and figuring out the cause can be complicated by the existence of the child's disability. As parents, we want to help our child in any way we can, and we also want the problematic behaviors to diminish or to stop altogether. We want behavior that is appropriate for the situation and that meets the needs of our child, and that also helps to keep our child happy and safe. Ultimately, we want what is best for our child. The whys of behavior. Psychologists and behavior analysts are of the opinion that the key to helping a child with inappropriate behavior lies in being able to figure out why the child behaves in the way that he does, as all behavior serves a purpose. When we understand why the child behaves and acts as he does, we may be able to alter some aspect of his environment to help him to satisfy his needs. Psychologists and therapists often make use of an analysis called the ABCs of behavior in order to work out the reasons behind a particular behavior. The ABC stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. A parent or therapist acts almost like a detective and keeps a record of what happens before the behavior occurs, what exactly happens during the behavior, and what happens as a consequence or result of the behavior. By keeping these records, a therapist or parent will consider what happens before, during, and after a behavior as a whole, and then take a step back and try to figure out why the behavior occurs and what can be done to help the child. This kind of analysis requires time, attention, and effort. I would say that it is not easy for a parent to do, but parents do need to try and work out why a particular behavior is occurring if they want to help their child. Let's look at an example of an ABC analysis. Antecedent. The teacher places James' work folder on his desk in front of him. Behavior. James sweeps his folder and pencil onto the floor. Consequence. The classroom aide puts James in timeout corner. He escapes doing his work. So in this case, we could probably guess that the reason for James's behavior is that he does not want to transition to a work activity. It could also be that that the work is of a level that is too difficult for him to manage, and he may then find the work aversive. So in order to help him, we could, for instance, include the transition in his schedule, and we could also adjust the level of difficulty of the work that is in the folder. The other thing that we should not do is put James into timeout, because timeout would then reinforce the escape route that he is trying to get at. Here's another example. At lunch, James sees that Martin has yogurt. James bangs himself in the head with his fist at the lunch table. Martin gives James his yogurt. He acquires the desired object. In this case, we could take a guess that obviously James is wanting to have the yogurt that belongs to Martin. And we could probably help James by teaching him how to use a visual to ask for what he wants, and also to teach him to ask another person for what he wants. Let's look at some more examples of possible whys for a behavior. A child has sensory difficulties. For example, he does not like the material or seams of his shirt. He finds it uncomfortable, so he just takes it off. A child is feeling hot, so he takes off his clothes. He fails to appreciate that it is not appropriate to do this and that he might solve the problem by changing into a cool set of clothes or by asking for help. A child cries because he is hungry, thirsty, or sick, but he is not able to tell his parents what is troubling him. A child does not want anyone touching the Lego he has built, but he does not have the words to tell his classmate not to touch, nor the understanding of appropriate social behavior, so he might hit or shove instead. A child was bullied at school the day before, and he is still upset about it on the following day, and this makes him refuse to cooperate at school. A child finds the book he is given too difficult to understand, so he throws it on the floor and walks away. A child goes home directly after school, but on a certain day his mother goes to the store instead. The child cries or tantrums because he expected and wants to go home. As we can see, the reasons for behavior are many and varied, and with children who have a speech and social impairment, as in the case of autism, they may lack the means to be able to tell us what is wrong or to regulate their environment to solve their problem. So how can we help our child? Firstly, we need to figure out the reason for the behavior. Once we know the reason, we can think of ways to help our child. There is no exhaustive list of reasons for a behavior or actions that can be taken to help a child. It all depends on the behavior, the reason for it, and the abilities of the child. We will need to develop different solutions for different causes and different situations, and they are also dependent upon the abilities and needs of the child. You may feel that it is quite complex and challenging to be able to discover causes and to come up with solutions, and that this is not easily accomplished. This may be true, but the alternative is to allow our children to languish in a world of frustration, silence, and despair, and to leave them to repeat behaviors that are not acceptable and do not work for them. We need at least to try to support our children so that they are empowered to change the behaviors that do not work for them or that separate them from the rest of society. I am not talking about trying to erase disabilities. This is more about teaching skills that will help and support your child. Here are some of the possible solutions that could preempt problematic behaviors and help to prevent them from occurring. Improving your child's understanding and his expression of language. As a first prize, you want your child to understand his world and to be able to express his needs, wants, and feelings by communicating them to you or to others. This will tend to minimize or stop the inappropriate behaviors that your child has adopted over time in order to cope with his needs and his environment. You could use visual strategies such as pics, which involve the use of photographs or pictures that can be used by a child to request what he wants or to express what he is feeling or to make comments. For example, a child gives you a picture of a snack and you provide him with one. If you have a child who is nonverbal or has limited speech, consider the use of pics or an electronic communication board or system to enable your child to make requests or comments and to allow him to gain more control of his environment. You could also enroll your child in a structured program of speech therapy, occupational therapy, or ABA therapy to increase skills and to improve verbal understanding, and to help your child to learn to communicate by making requests for what he wants, by expressing his own feelings, and by making comments on his world. The more you enable your child to learn about the world, to communicate with others, and to get his needs and wants met by communicating them himself, the more you will be able to help him to avoid inappropriate behaviors that he has used in the past. Remember that any such program developed by a speech therapist, occupational therapist, or ABA therapist must be designed to meet such functional goals in order to help your child to regulate his behavior. As a parent or caregiver, and if you have time, you could also observe the techniques used by therapists and you could replicate them at home, and in this way reinforce the learning process that occurs during therapy sessions. You could also create a visual routine for your child. That is a timetable or schedule that contains pictures and shows your child the layout of his day. This would also allow you to make changes of routine which can be visually shown to him in advance on the routine board so that he is able to anticipate a change to his routine and manage transitions more easily. Using visuals, you could also break down a life skill into its smallest parts and teach your child step by step how to complete a task. For example, teach a child step by step how to make his own sandwich. This would give your child more independence and control, and this in turn helps to avoid the use of negative behaviors to meet various needs. Where a child has pressing sensory needs, for example, he cannot tolerate light, sound, or noise, or the presence of too many people in a crowd, you can avoid places that trigger these sensitivities. You can also teach your child visually using a card made for this purpose to request a break or to leave the place that is causing the problem. Some behaviors are linked to conditions that may require medical treatment, for example, anxiety or aggression, and which may be related to inappropriate behaviors that function as coping mechanisms. In such cases, you may need to consult with a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist in order to obtain an appropriate medical treatment. Use as many visual tools as possible to meet the needs of your child. For example, a choice board, which gives a child options in terms of food or activities and therefore gives him more control over what is going to happen to him. You could also use visual schedules, calendars, instructions on how to execute a task, or rules for various situations. These tools support communication, provide information, teach rules that apply in different situations, teach skills, prevent problems, and support the child through his daily routines. Academic achievement does not translate into success with communication, social interaction, or life skills. A child may have skills of reading, writing, and doing math, but may not have learned to express himself or to interact socially with others. In order to improve a child's quality of life, functional communication, social and life skills tend to be more important than the achieving of academic goals. Here are some examples of visual tools that can be used to support your child. The first one is a daily schedule: breakfast, bathroom, brushing of teeth and snack, lunch, schoolwork, nap time, relaxing dinner, jobs or chores, shower, bath, pajamas, and bed. The second tool is one that teaches a life skill, how to make a sandwich. And here no words have been used, only the pictures have been set out to explain the process. The first is to get the bread, then to spread the bread, to cut the cheese and the tomato, to place the cheese and tomato on the bread, to close the sandwich, and then to eat. Here are some more examples of visual tools that can be used to help a child and to guide him to regulate his behavior. The first one is rules about anger. It's okay to be angry, but don't hurt others, don't hurt yourself, don't hurt property, and talk about how you feel. And there are a range of pictures here that are used to support the explanation. The other one is about when a child feels overwhelmed and needs a break. He is being told or guided to ask for a break, to ask an adult. And during his break, he could go for a walk, drink some water, talk to someone, or just be alone if that is what he wants. And he is reassured that using these strategies, he will be able to be safe and calm. A therapist, remedial teacher, speech therapist, or occupational therapist can teach a child specific skills that will allow him to make requests, to make comments, to deliver a protest, for example, saying no or I need to leave, use social language, example, hi, let's play, or to express feelings, example, I feel sad, or even to use gestures such as showing or pointing, or holding up a communication card in order to communicate. Ensure that the therapist teacher follows a program that helps a child to acquire useful skills and language that will improve his quality of life by being able to communicate. Goals that do not help a child to navigate his world by acquiring the ability to communicate in some way and also to acquire social and life skills, these should, in my opinion, be reprioritized. As the most important thing that we want is for our children to be able to express their needs and to successfully communicate in some way. Parents, therapists, and caregivers can create social stories to help a child to navigate his world. Social stories were developed by Carol Gray, and they are a tool that allows for meaningful exchange of information between parents, caregivers, therapists, and a person with autism. The social story will acknowledge and be respectful of the feelings and attitudes of the autistic person, but it at the same time provides helpful guidance to him about what to do in a particular situation. Here is an example of a social story. You can pinpoint areas of possible concern, and if your child has sufficient language, develop a social story to help your child to regulate his own behavior in a specific situation. This social story covers the activity of going to the mall. When I go to the mall, I have fun. At the mall, there are lots of different stores that I can go to. I stay with an adult when I am at the mall. I don't walk by myself. We go into different stores and sometimes we buy things. If I want to go to a store, I need to ask, can I go to the store, please? I don't go into a store without letting my parents know first. I like going to the mall. When I have good behavior, I can have fun at the mall. As human beings, we need to acknowledge the role that we as parents or teachers may play in causing or being partially responsible for a particular behavior. Behavior is very much the result of an interaction between different people, and this is why we need to consider our own behavior and actions. We should examine our actions and consider what we can do to improve a situation. Of course, in reality, most people will not adjust their responses to accommodate our children. But as caregivers and the people who interact most with our child, we do need to consider our responses and actions and the role that it may play in shaping our child's behavior. So what could we change with regard to ourselves? Firstly, a calming presence is very helpful. If we are calm and we respond positively, there is a better chance that our children will also be calm. If we lose our temper often and are easily rattled, this will not calm things down. Talking too much or explaining too much, blaming in a tense situation will also not help. It's better for us to talk as little as possible and also to say only what is absolutely necessary. For example, if your child has to surrender an object, example a knife, simply hold out your hand and point to it. Grabbing or shouting may endanger both of you. Of course, the appropriate response depends entirely on the situation and your child's frame of mind. You will have to assess what is the best action to take. You could also use your body to prevent certain things from happening. Example, calmly and firmly blocking with your arm instead of grabbing a child's hand to prevent him from striking. You could reward a child's inappropriate behavior, and if you did this, this will increase the likelihood of the behavior occurring in the future. For example, a child screams because he does not want to leave the park, and you then in response stay in the park to allow him to play for a longer period. This will increase the likelihood of the child crying in the future to remain in the park when it is time for him to leave. So it's therefore important for us not to reward inappropriate behaviors and to reward the behaviors that we want to see more of. Instead of focusing on stopping problematic behaviors when they occur, it is wiser to take a step back, to examine the whys of various behaviors and to consider proactive solutions that will prevent the behavior from occurring in the future. For example, if we know that a child's routine is going to change, we can make her aware using appropriate visuals of what is going to happen and possibly also draw her attention to the positive things that will happen. For example, she will not be going to the park, but she will be going for pizza instead. We could teach our children appropriate behaviors to replace the inappropriate ones. For example, teach a child how to request a snack by using a card or a choice board, and the child will use this method of communicating instead of crying or becoming angry when he is hungry or thirsty. It is also important that we respond reasonably to our child's attempts to communicate so that he grows to understand that communication is powerful and will allow him to get his needs and wants met. Let's look at meltdowns because these are obviously of concern to many parents. A meltdown is an intense response to an overwhelming situation. It happens when someone becomes completely overwhelmed by their current situation and temporarily loses control of their own behavior. When this happens, here are a few rules that you may need to follow. Firstly, guide your child to a safe space. Remember that safety is a priority as your child has lost control of his behavior. Don't try to reason with your child. They are not in the frame of mind to listen and will only become more agitated. Remain calm and supportive and don't become angry. Avoid touching your child and keep other people away from her. Your child must have space and time to calm down, and you must wait while this is happening. Keep the environment quiet and calming. For example, switch off music or the television. When the meltdown is over, you could engage in an activity, or at least your child could engage in an activity that she finds helpful and soothing. For example, playing with a pet. When my daughter was little, her meltdowns related mostly to special toys or objects that she was attached to and carried everywhere. If the object broke or went missing, she would have a meltdown. We would have to wait for the meltdown to pass. There was almost nothing we could do or thought to do to stop it. As she grew older and her ability to communicate expanded, she had less meltdowns. As a young adult, she has very few and is calm most days. Meltdowns as a young adult for her relate to a change of routine or to her own thoughts or memories that might be upsetting to her. In all these situations, it helped for us to remain calm, respectful, and supportive. We also needed to have lots of patience, as sometimes she would be upset for what felt like a long time, hours, or even periodically within days. It also helped for us not to try to talk, reason, or argue with her, but at the same time, we had to not ignore her or become upset with her. We really needed to give her time and space to calm down. Thank you for listening. I hope that this video has helped to shed some light on a very difficult topic. My next video will be about autism as a spectrum disorder, what we mean when we refer to autism as being on a spectrum, and the implications for children with autism.